All right. So David, I want to talk about Floorcraft.
Yes, good topic.
And first of all, that in and of itself, vast topic, right? There's so much to talk about floor etiquette, floor craft, put them together, floor craft etiquette. There's even more, right? But let's just talk generally about floor craft and the way dances are moving around the floor and whatever, right? So in smooth, you have that line of dance, meaning we're all going the same direction, right? Around. It's counterclockwise. And it's just like traffic, right? Like you want to make sure you're not being that guy that's cutting off traffic, and it's like you don't want to rear end anyone. You don't want to so it makes sense in a car for all that stuff. But then you get on the dance floor and people are in the middle of a line of dance and being like, here's a great time for a tuck turn and an explosion, maybe a handstand. Like, what is happening right now?
Those handstands, yes.
They,
Uh,
they
I,
get
you
you
know,
all.
I,
I
I,
don't know.
I, I agree. And it's something that I find a lot of social dancers. Uh, I think they never really were taught. They have like some basic idea that okay, I guess people move counterclockwise around the floor, and maybe that's all they know, right?
Mhm.
But they didn't. They never really learned about the fact that the outer lanes, right, as you're closer to the wall, those are supposed to be the fast lanes, right? And if you're moving slower, or if you can't move, or sometimes, because I do a lot of dance hosting at certain events, sometimes I'm with a partner who can't move very well, so it's helpful to be able to move to the center of the floor. But a
Yes.
lot of people don't know about some of those fundamental uh,
Yeah.
rules of the road.
Well, yeah, I totally agree. It's like for me, because I roller skated back in the day, right? So that makes sense to me. All the people who couldn't skate, which I always found interesting, you had to like Frogger style your way across the floor to get to the middle, right? So I always
Right.
found that interesting. But typically, the middle is where the people are learning how to skate. That keeps you out of harm's way. So from a young age, it made sense to me. Middle towards the outside is how your level of ability goes, right? So if I need my wheels locked as a roller skater, I just chuck on out to the middle and I stay in the middle, right? And that's how I learned ballroom, especially waltz, because waltz doesn't really travel first. Waltz, you got to do the box, you got to learn the patterns, and then they get to travel,
Well,
right?
I'll tell you, Kelly, I when I was very early in my dance life, while I loved things like the waltz and stuff, I hated the travel dances in general at a social because I didn't know how to navigate the floor.
Yeah.
And in fact, I remember, I think the very first time I went to a social, and like I didn't even really know how to do like a progressive box step. And so like I do a couple and I'm backing up, and people are getting pissed with me, right? Because I'm
Yeah,
backing
yeah,
up
you're
into them,
backing up.
and I didn't know, right? And so for for a few years, I really preferred the spot dances, right?
Yeah.
Rumba, cha-cha, salsa, West Coast swing, East Coast swing, those kinds of things, because while you still have to contend with traffic, you're not contending with this circular traffic. It's just like sometimes someone next to you is encroaching on your space, and you
Right.
get to know how to like scooch over a little bit
Yep.
or adjust, but you didn't have the same challenges.
Right.
At some point, I kind of figured out how to deal with traffic better, and now I really am kind of into it, right? It's kind of like part of the joy about how to figure out how to navigate the floor. But I do find often there'll be, you run into people way over in the outside lanes who are like, they just don't know, right? They were
Yeah.
like I was,
Yeah.
and so sometimes I'm now breaking the rules because I'm moving fast, and so I'm cutting towards the inside to get around them,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
But,
No, I
but
totally get it
you have to
because
do what you have to do, right?
yeah,
But
because not everyone teaches that rule because some people just teach patterns. So to be
Right.
effective on a pattern, right? A lot of times ballroom dance is taught for competition. It's not as social as it was when it, you know, back in the 30s and the 20s and whatever. It was more social. Now it's more competition. So people are just trying to jam their patterns onto a crowded floor. So now you've got somebody who's taught to go into the corner, come out to the corner, go down, go to the center, come to the outside, just so you can show you can use the floor. But now you've cut like 8 people off who are just trying to get around the floor.
Right.
Yeah,
And so I think it's really helpful for people to know this, because it is good to have some basic agreed upon rules
I
to make
agree.
it more enjoyable for everyone. And so, like, I find, depending on the type of dance, I will often alternate between going from the outside to the inside, because often I like to get a flight, right? If I'm doing a foxtrot or
Yep.
a quick step or a waltz, Viennese waltz, I enjoy getting flight. But then sometimes I want to do some kind of figure where I'm going to be stopping, right? So then I'm cutting more towards the inside. I'm going to do an explosion or something like that, as you say, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and so that's helpful. But yeah, sometimes just because when you have a number of people on the floor who don't know the rules, it forces you to sometimes break the rules as well, and then you're getting like even more chaos, right?
Yes.
Um,
Yeah, and it's so interesting how we're taught, right? Because I was taught the same way, and I even teach the same way. I teach in groupings. It's a good way for you to retain, right? But I also, as I'm teaching these groupings, I'm telling them why we're doing the things in the order that we're doing them, right? And the reason I bring this up is because think of driving. Think of all of us that went to driving school. It'd be the same thing as learning to drive in the same parking lot and having that pattern trying to go to the store. Like, it just doesn't work. You have to change. You have to know turning right, turning left, applying all of these things right away, right? But we learn in a pattern. We learn in a safe environment, but then when we go out, it's immediately applied, that we get to think for ourselves. We get to apply these things to a real life situation. But yet in ballroom dancing, it's just like you'll see that that clash of cultures almost, right? Of people who've learned only pattern based, people who've learned only social based, and people who haven't learned at all. Like, people are just out there having fun. So it's an interesting mix, man.
uh, I think the worst thing that drives me nuts sometimes is you'll get people who will stand in the middle of the floor and they're having like a social conversation, right? They're not even dancing,
Oh yes.
right?
Yeah. Like I
So
like, yes, I
please
will.
don't do that.
Yeah, right. I totally agree. In fact, the other night was dancing, and it was a 2-step. I would do over this weekend. It was Swing City, Chicago, great West Coast swing event. But that swing dancers are also avid country dancers. So every now and then you'll have a 2-step thrown in. So somebody grabs me, I'm like, yeah, I'll 2-step. And I just go to get started, and they're a little taller. And next thing you know, I take like one basic, and we're decently into the floor, and bam, like we run into somebody, and I go, oh my God, I feel so bad. And I look, and it's 2 people standing there talking. Like, they weren't dancing. And I was like, first of all, that's a bad idea. Second of all, you're in the middle of the line of dance for a traveling dance. What did you think was going to happen? Like, it's kind of funny, but at the same time, it's like, what are you doing?
Yes, exactly. So, sometimes you get a certain piece of music where you could dance different styles of dance as well, right?
Yes.
So, like one of the ones that's often very common is a piece of music where you can dance a foxtrot, and you can very easily dance like an East Coast swing to the
Yep.
same music, right? And so this is a case where it's really important because one is a travel dance and one really isn't, right? And so if and you can do either, and both can be cool, right? But if you're going to be doing that swing,
Yeah.
please go to the center of the floor.
Yes. I feel like I've been hitting a lot of events lately. I recently was at Harvest Moon ballroom competition, and that exactly happened. In one of while we were switching divisions or something like that, the DJ put on a social song, and we're dancing. And next thing you know, it's like I get to the end of the line of dance, and there's random people just hanging out on the end of the floor doing swing. And I was like, well, that's great. I love it. But can you please go to the inside of the floor? You know what I mean? So I completely agree. You got to, and even if you're not trained, you know what I mean? Like, take scope of the floor. You know what I mean? Like, don't cannonball into a pool, right? When you go to a pool, check the temperature,
Nice analogy. Yes.
right? Or do you just go, I'm here? And depends on the day, depends on the mood. I might cannonball in just to have some fun. But typically, I'd like to know how cold, warm the water is. How are they swimming in the pool? Like, what's happening? You know what I mean? So all of these real life analogies totally work. But then you go dancing, and it's like everyone's cannonballing into the pool.
Yes. Yeah. And sometimes, even if it's not a travel dance, like there's some venues I know where um, most of the seating is off on like one end of the floor.
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, there'll be a cha-cha and there's this one side of the floor that everyone's getting up and they're all like all crowding on that side which is close to the tables.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm always like grabbing my partner and leading them to the far end because it's nice to have some space, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know why uh, many more people aren't doing that. So just even for a stationary dance, scope out the floor, as you said. You be aware of your surroundings, right? Take advantage of where there is space.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm always doing it. There's sometimes where I worry that my follow will think I'm not paying attention to them, right? Because I'm dancing, I'm trying to interact with them. There are times where I'm not looking at them all because of that reason. Maybe I'm next to someone who's a little flashier, a little wilder. I don't want to get hit by this person. So I'm constantly watching out for them. Or I'm making sure that somebody didn't jump into my spot as we moved with a turn or something. You know what I mean? So I'm spending a decent amount of time watching around me as I'm dancing. Yeah.
One of my first dance instructors, um, as I mentioned earlier, I was having a hard time with dealing with travel dances, and I went to him and I said, can you give me some tips about how to just redirect and better deal with traffic?
Uh,
And his first comment to me was, David, he says, I don't understand what the problem is. You're a big guy. Put a determined look on your face and people will get the hell out of your way. And some people really do dance that way. Now, in complete fairness, the he was joking with me, and then he went on to give me a bunch of really useful tips, right,
right.
to truly navigate around. But I do sometimes go to socials where uh, there's someone who just goes barreling through, and people are like,
Yeah.
here comes Bob, or
Yeah.
fictional Bob.
Yeah.
Um,
Fictional Bob. Bob and as what's the popular fellow's name? Karen. There's so many memes about Karen, right? Bob and Karen coming through again.
that determined look on their face.
Oh man.
Scramble, everyone.
And you know what? And there is, and this goes a little bit further too, because understanding Floorcraft and the direction and the line of dance and staying, staying in a status quo and all that other stuff applies, but also this little factoid of the appropriate size frame or size dance as to the situation. If I'm at just a social night out, could be a social bar, it could be a dinner party where no one else is really a dancer. Doesn't matter. If it's a traveling dance or even just a regular dance, I don't have a full frame. I've got a very comfortable, very social frame. My elbows are down and I'm not taking up much space. But you go into those situations and you can tell who's taking lessons, right, or whatever, because then they try to get this big frame, and now you're like running into like 80-year-olds who are just dancing because they like the song, and you're taking people out with twinkles and all this other stuff, and you're like, bro, this is a dinner party, man. Pull it back a little.
Yeah. I might be a little bit guilty of that because I do like the, taking the big frame and making lines and stuff because there's joy in that. At least for me, I
Yeah.
that's part of the joy of the dance. But I hear you. Like there are venues and situations where the floor is just too crowded and
Yeah.
you have to pull it in, or you definitely you have to be aware of your surroundings, right?
Yeah.
Don't be just like throwing the arm out there unless you know that there's space there,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And I don't want to sound like I'm hammering down on anyone who likes big frames and like to make lines. I love that myself. I love a good X line, a good
Kelly's
lump.
always picking on me.
Boom, always picking on you, Dave. How dare you? But it's that same analogy of you can have a Ferrari or you can have another really fast car. It doesn't matter, but it's still only 25 in a school zone. I don't
Right.
care how cool your car is. You know what I mean? Now, you get out on somewhere like the Autobahn. Yeah, that Ferrari, baby, it's going to fly. And then the person in the very comfortable jalopy just kind of putzing along. You better get out of their way, right? But it's the situation that determines whether or not I'm rocking the Ferrari or the jalopy.
Yes. Yeah, I completely agree with you.
Mhm. All right, so I've shared enough stories, but I want to share this one because it really applies. I've been talking a lot about floorcraft and smooth dancing, and you were nice enough to bring up also rhythm dances or nightclub dances that don't travel, owning your own spot, right?
Or there's some, obviously, if you're doing standard, or there's things like samba that travels as well.
Yeah, yeah, that
Right.
travels as
Right.
well, and it's a line of dance. So I'm competing at this event, which is a West Coast event, and I'm in a Jack and Jill where you don't know your partner and you don't know the song and you rotate. And one of my draws within this competition went. The best thing I can say about it is went rogue, right? So you have what they call slots in West Coast swing, where everyone's dancing the same way, so that way you're not randomly running into people. It's not like East Coast swing because that's more rotational, so you just have a small area. West Coasters all have the same directional slot, especially in a competition. And I'm dancing with this person, and I bring her in. And I'm just doing the basic patterns just to get a feel, right, before I start busting out the stuff. And next thing you know, let's say we're going north and south. I don't know if that was the actual direction, but just to give you a visual, she now starts leading herself east and west. And I'm in my brain, I'm like, well, maybe she thinks I'm on the wrong slot because she was very decidedly going east and west. And I was like, at first, I gave her the benefit of the doubt, like, okay, maybe she's trying a move to change the slot and change it back to show off. And then I thought, maybe she thinks we're on the wrong slot. So I'm always adjusting and fixing, right? So I'm like, okay, I go east and west enough to go back north and south. Then she starts going diagonal, northeast to north. And I was like, what is happening, right? Like losing her mind. And so finally,
Her compass was broken.
compass was going crazy, man. It's like the compass was around what magnets or whatever makes it go crazy. And so I eventually just ended up pulling her into closed position and finishing the round in closed position because I couldn't trust that she wasn't going to go rogue and hit the couples next to us. I was like, and I had danced with her previously before the comp. I was excited that I pulled her because she's a wonderful dancer. Maybe she was nervous and isn't like a strong competitor. I don't know, but just went rogue completely. It was crazy.
So now I've seen this kind of thing in socials as well, with something like a West Coast swing, which is very slot oriented, as you said. It do you think there's a best practice like on the floor? Like, should people line up according to the long side of the floor, or the short side of the floor, or
Yes. So socially, unless it's otherwise talked about, anything with a slot dance, let's use West Coast since we're talking about it, goes length of the floor, every floor you have, right? Which is interesting because anytime they do workshops, they usually change it up in short side of the floor. Maybe that's so everyone can see them and stuff like that. But if you're social dancing, it's always the length of the floor. And if you have a perfectly square room, then someone decide the direction in the beginning of the night, and that's the direction you go. The thing I find really interesting is when you go to other dances, like you go to a ballroom dance, and West Coast is just one of many styles of songs played. Well, if you're only dancing one song, no one worries about that rule. So then they start seeing slots going any which way, and you just hope they don't run into each other.
Yeah, yeah. So I've seen that exactly in those situations where you get probably like 80% going one way, and then you get a few rogues that are like, what are you doing? Although sometimes I personally have done this where um, if the floor is kind of crowded, but there's just some room at the end of the floor,
Oh, you'll
uh,
dance the other way.
like against the wall, like on the short side, because hey, there was space there and there wasn't any other space.
Yeah.
But I think I could kind of pull that off without creating havoc, right? But yeah, I sometimes seen exactly in the middle of the floor, I don't know, like people with no situational awareness, just like bumping into everyone because they're like going in
Yeah.
exactly the perpendicular direction of everyone else, and it's
Yeah.
kind of yeah, and
And
and you know when I was asking you about is there a best practice, because I really didn't know, I just kind of try to observe, well, what are most people doing, and generally I'll try to follow that.
yeah.
Uh, but yeah,
Yeah, and it's
that's
and
good to
it's
know.
and it goes all over the place, right? And I don't mean all over the place, but it's the roles can be reversed. Like you said, foxtrot. Typically, that's also going to be a great swing to me. In fact, when I started I worked for Arthur Murray for a while, and but before I worked for Arthur Murray, I'd been doing swing dancing for years. So at nice jazz standard comes on, I'm like, hey, let's get. I know enough to go to the middle because I had some ballroom exposure, but I'd go in the middle and I dance my swing in the middle and be nice and but yeah, so it can go either way. So if I'm a swing dancer and I'm out swinging and there's one person doing foxtrot, I want to try to be nice enough to maybe not dance all the way to the edge of the floor, right? Uh, if you have space, then just don't dance to the edge. But if you don't have space and it can't be helped, it can't be helped, right? If it's a popular night. But if there's enough room, try to dance in a little bit. So that way, if somebody wants to do foxtrot to the song, they can politely get around you. They can obey the rules of their road by you obeying the rules of your road.
Well said. So Kelly, I wanted to talk to you about group classes and etiquette in group classes.
Yes.
um there's so many group classes are wonderful. They can be like a great experience, or they're nice way to meet new people. uh a lot of people start out dancing in group classes,
Yep.
um but there are certain things that sometimes go wrong, and just if people are can be sensitive to it, and sometimes you just need to hear about it and you can kind of self-reflect or whatnot, but
Yep.
it can create an even better experience.
Yes. Uh,
So
so are you so are you talking about the unofficial helper?
that's one of the big ones. Tell us about the unofficial helper, Kelly.
Oh, the unofficial helper is the person in group class that takes it upon themselves to then teach the partner they're with. They're not the instructor. They're not appointed by the instructor to be a helper. They're just a fellow student in the class, and they take it upon themselves to correct people in the class. And I will say the unofficial helpers, right? They uh, they are the ones, the really serious ones who do it all the time, do it with everyone instead of just like helping one person. So every time you rotate or every time they're now helping, and it's like, don't.
So we're not talking so much just about you're with a partner and they're confused and they ask you a question or clarification. We're talking about unsolicited help.
Unsolicited help. That's a good way to put it because I really like a back and forth if I'm in a class, whether I know the class, whether I don't know the class, so back and forth. Did that work? Did you feel it? How did this work? I felt this. Great, excellent. There's communication. We've both learned from it. But like you said, the unsolicited. Oh,
And so I honestly, giving people the benefit of the doubt, I think people are doing it well intentioned, but they just are unaware that they're disrupting the class overall, right? Because it's creating a distraction often for
yes.
people around them.
Yeah.
Sometimes it could be confusing your partner because you don't really know what the instructor is intending, what they are trying to convey. Maybe you know a similar step that's just a little bit different,
Right.
and you're correcting to that version, and
Yes.
now you've confused the person who might well know less than you, that you're trying to help out. um so yeah, I think the best advice is leave it to the instructor, right? And
Yes.
if you can, if someone's confused, or if you think there's something, even if you think you know the answer, maybe put up your hand, ask the question to which you think you know the answer to, right?
Yeah.
Maybe because you can help out the rest of the class that way.
Hmm.
um
David, you had mentioned, because we like to talk about these subjects as we're coming up with the next podcast, and so we'll talk about some of these things a couple of times by the time it's now podcast time. And you had mentioned that you have a friend who teaches and sometimes asks you to be in the class, right? It's a level class, like maybe it's a beginner class where you already know what's happening or whatever, and it, I want to explain a little bit about that. Is the I, as a teacher, also do that. And the best thing that we can do is, as a more advanced dancer, being in a beginner class, is simply dance the pattern. So this way, we're teaching the follows as a leader, and as a follower, we're teaching the leaders what it feels like just to do the pattern. Because if you're learning a pattern for the first time, you don't know the ins and outs of what it's supposed to feel like a lot of times. So the best thing that you can do if somebody asks you to help in class is to be a silent helper and just lead exactly what they're saying.
right, right. So one of the other things I see in group classes, and I think this is universal, people have a lot of get really tied up around rotation. So most group classes, right, we rotate partners,
Mm-hmm.
and it should be a fairly straightforward thing, right? Most of the people in these classes are reasonably educated. Inevitably, there is confusion, um, and sometimes, um, some instructors, they ask that the followers stay put and the leaders move.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's the other way around.
Mm-hmm.
um, Sometimes it gets confusing because maybe they're teaching a travel dance, and so as you're doing it with one partner, what you might actually pass another partner because
Whoever's
maybe
supposed to
they
do
were confused and stopped and you kept going.
it. Right.
um, so I find this is a source of frustration for a lot of students in a group class, and for instructors too, because valuable time is being wasted with
You know,
people getting upset that, wait a minute, no, it's Billy's turn next, and or
yep.
John and, let's say, John and Jane, right? um so I don't know what your views are on this, Kelly. uh to some extent, I'd say, you know if everyone could kind of try to keep track of who they're following, like if you're a leader and the leaders are rotating, just keep track of who you're behind and always try to be
Yeah.
following that person, or vice versa. uh but if it doesn't work out, don't worry about it. Like,
Yes.
let's not delay everyone 5 minutes by getting into a tizzy because we're out of order. It doesn't really matter all that much.
Yes, I agree. And there's some people who are very specific, right? Like maybe they're OCD. Maybe we don't know this. Maybe that really is a big deal to them. And I get it. But in a group class, as a teacher, I have very limited time to teach you what I want to teach you. And it's even less because I have a group of people and I want to make sure all the kids are on the bus when I go to the field trip. You know what I mean? So spending time on the rotation and who's supposed to go where, to get rid of that, I just try to rotate a lot. So whatever dance we're doing, rotate again, rotate again, rotate again, just so that way, all right, we've got them moving enough. Eventually, they'll cycle through many partners. You know what I mean? But I will say this, and this is poking fun at myself as well. I think dancers, as complicated as patterns as we can learn, the funniest thing is watching a group class of dancers try to rotate, like rotate partners, and it always gets messed up. Somebody goes left, the other person goes right. Like it's kind of funny. It's kind of hilarious.
It is kind of funny.
Oh.
So the one of the other things that I see is sometimes you get the person who is, they're just confused, or they're just having a hard time with a step, right? And it happens. Like I'm a slow learner when it comes to a lot of new physical activities, right? It takes me a
Mhm.
while sometimes.
Mhm.
Um, but on the other hand, it is a group class, right? And so sometimes if you're having difficulty, you absolutely should ask for help, ask a question and stuff. Get as much clarification as you can. But at some point, you need to be ready to let it go, right?
Yes.
Because we have a whole group of people, and we need to be respectful of the whole group of people,
Mhm.
whether it's a class that you're paying for, or a group class at a social that maybe just part of the admission. Um, yeah, by all means, if you have a question, ask your question. If you have, if something's not clear, even a follow up, fine. If you're still confused beyond that, maybe it's time to let it go and ask the instructor afterwards,
Yes.
or at some point, maybe a private lesson is in order, but be respectful of everyone else's time as well.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. There's so much about this. There's so much etiquette involved in group classes, right? And whether it's the unofficial helper, whether it's the person who's learned a triple step when they first learned this way, and now you're telling them a different way and they're hung up on that, right? Or whatever. It doesn't matter what it is. There's so many ins and outs in social group class. And you really want to be cautious of that, or conscious of that, I should say. Not cautious, but conscious of that. It's if you're in a class of something you already know, the best thing you can do is exactly like you said, don't hang on to anything, right? Don't even hang on to your own ego if you're an advanced dancer. There's so many times where I will willingly jump into a beginner lesson because the numbers are really off, right? Maybe there's a lot of follows and no leads. Well, I'll jump into that to help out, but I am in no way trying to steal students, trying to take over their class, torpedo them. It's my job to help alleviate the fact that there's so many extra on one side versus the other, right?
Right.
And at that, the best thing I can do is just be that extra body. You know what I mean? So I think a lot of people misunderstand that now when they're in a class that they already know, now they might be like, oh, well, let me help you. Nope. Go ahead. And if you have questions, please ask me. Let's have that back and forth. But the reason I'm saying let go of the ego is if somebody asks a question that even I know the answer, I'll raise my hand and I'll ask it. What's the timing on this? Or how do I lead that? And if the teachers know me now, they know that I'm not asking for myself. I'm asking for someone else. But it's always interesting because I'll have the teachers who haven't been in class before, and they're like, "You know this answer. Why are you asking me this?" And I'm like, "Well, just ask,
Humor
just
me.
answer." Yeah, right. Because there's going to be other people asking that, but to somebody else who isn't going to bring it up to the teacher who's in charge. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I've seen that this other pattern as well, where um, you get the student who learned a different variation on the same step,
Yeah.
and now they have to interrupt the class to tell them, well, when I learned this step from Billy Bob, it went it went this way, almost sometimes questioning whether the instructor you currently have is teaching it correctly.
Right.
And hey, folks, it's dance. There's 1,001 times 1,001 different ways you can do a lot
Mhm.
of dance steps, right? That's what makes dancing so great.
Right.
There's not just one way to do everything. And so keep an open mind, right? You'll learn another way or two to do fundamentally the same step.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. First of all, I just have to say I love your made up names on the spot. Like I almost want to tell more stories just so you can keep coming up with more names. Like I love it.
You think I'm making up Billy Bob?
Oh, I will say this too, also, since we're talking about dance etiquette, something I've recently noticed in a group class that I was in was that the instructor had it set up for a leader and for follower, meaning you would do the basic of that dance, and then they showed you variations on either side of the fence. So you do one basic, you do one where the follower did their variation. Then you had the one where the leader did the variation. Then you'd have one where they both did the variation. And it's super important that you get the feel of doing the variation, not doing the variation, and doing the variation with each other. As a leader, I cannot say what the leaders were doing, but I can tell you that every follow wanted to get that variation so much, they didn't care about that. They were trying the variation everything, like every time. And it was like, please respect the order, because how do I know as a leader what it's going to feel like if I try it later socially and somebody doesn't know this variation? So it's like really paying attention to what the teacher is teaching and how they're teaching. You know what I mean? Like paying attention to that order, because they're phrasing it. They're putting those steps in place for a particular reason. You know,
Right.
it's like my favorite analogy of group class is just like going to a comedy show, right? The comic, if they're decent, has written this bit in this order for this payoff. And then you get the hecklers, right? Or then you get like people helping them write the joke or whatever. And you're like, okay, you're here for the show for them to do their job, right? Dance class, we want more interaction, but we set the show up this particular way. If you have questions, we'll answer it, but don't go off script. Stay with me, enjoy the journey so you get the payoff.
I've seen exactly that type of thing too, where an instructor might might be introducing a dance that's maybe new to many of the students, right? Because maybe they're a fairly early level of dance,
Right.
and so he'll show them something that maybe is a little bit more fancy, just to tell them a little bit, this is what the dance can become, right?
Yeah.
And to maybe inspire them, and then you get the one or two people who will say, oh, I want to do that now, right? And so he's like now trying to give them the basic. No. Can we do that like that fancy, you
Yep.
know,
Yep.
high
Yep.
high
Oh,
physics step, and and again, well intentioned, but really not in some sense trusting the instructor who at some point will say, you're, I'm sorry, but you're not ready for that.
yep. Yeah.
And let me give you some grounding first and give you something that you can do effectively so you get on the dance floor and start dancing.
Yeah.
And we'll get to that maybe next year or whenever, right?
We'll get to that when you're ready. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes, I've seen that. And I've had to deal with that as a teacher, because you want them to see where it can go. Right. So in a beginner like salsa class, right, you do the basic and you show them, here's the basic, here's going to turn. And at the end of class, or even at the beginning, depending on how you're structuring your stuff, you'll show them boom, 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 boom. Or you'll show them a turn, have them rep it, and you'll be like, this eventually can lead to this. And they'll be like, well, teach me that. And you're like, no. Like, you're not ready for all of that yet. This is the class that we're in right now.
Right,
Yeah.
right. The
Oh,
cartwheels come next week. Yes.
yeah, right. Exactly. Oh, the cartwheels come next week. I'm going to use that one. That's excellent.
Well, yeah. So that's a set of good points, I think, for everyone to keep in mind, right? To
Yeah.
really have a much more successful and enjoyable group class experience.
Yeah, that's right. It's I like a group class where everyone is worried about the whole. The whole of the group class. I think it's important that everyone gets what they learn from it, right? So if you're having an issue learning something, then bring it up, because you're only as like a chain. You're only as strong as your weakest link. And if your weakest link can't do this pattern at all, well, who am I going to dance with later? I'm going to dance with you, and you don't understand the pattern. I want to be able to enjoy it later. So ask all the questions. I'll go as slow in a group class as a passenger as anyone else. I love it. So I think some people are so worried about not understanding it, or they try to fake it or whatever. No, we're all in this together, good, bad, and different. Like, we're all on a group. So let's do this together.
Right.
Yeah.
Agreed. So, you've been dancing for a long while. I've been dancing not quite so long, but dancing is a real physical activity. And if you want to be fairly decent, even just as a social dancer, right? If you
Mhm.
have no intent of competing or anything like that, there's really some simple exercises you can do to keep yourself fit and in better shape as a social dancer.
Yeah, I agree. It's social dancing is a skill just like anything else. So if you want to become better at it, you should start learning some of these cool tricks and cool exercises to help you with your dancing.
So I'm really excited about the fact that a friend of mine, Tatiana Keegan, who is just a fabulous dancer.
Hmm.
She's a Latin dancer. She's actually competed in Latin. She's competed at smooth. At one point, she competed at standard, but she's primarily a Latin dancer. She used to be partners with Tony Devillani from Dancing with the Stars.
Wow, nice.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so she's agreed to show us some simple exercises for social
Oh,
dancers
excellent.
to help you better. So we recorded the other day Tatiana giving us some good ankle exercises that anyone can do. You don't need any special equipment or anything to help strengthen your ankles and make you a better social dancer. So we're going to post that. I'm going to put a link to it in the show notes
Okay.
and check it out. Yeah, it's something simple that you can do, just taking a few minutes every day or a couple times a week, however often you care to pursue it. But when I first saw it, I thought, oh, that's simple, and I tried it. I thought, well, okay, yeah, I've been dancing for a while, right? I could really see some benefit from these exercises, so it's kind of cool.
Yeah, you sometimes it's hard. In fact, I like to do stuff like this myself and with my students. So it's sometimes I will have them record themselves like before they try something. And I want them to see the before and after, right? So
Nice.
that way record yourself, like learn the exercise, record your first day or your first time doing the exercise. And then as often as you can, however that is, depends on how obsessed you are, right? The better results you get for muscle memory is often and close together, right? Throughout the day and over the weeks. And then after a while, record yourself again and you will visually see a difference in being able to like hold versus when you started and then, being wobbly or whatever. And
Yeah.
it's sometimes we need that extra like, oh, this is working, because if you feel so good at it, you don't often realize you had issues with it in the past.
Right, right. And this exercise that Tatiana is going to share with us, it'll just make you more stable in general. Uh,
Oh, that's awesome.
so if for those of us who are aging, well, I guess we're all aging, but getting a little bit older, uh, it'll help you make you a little bit less susceptible to falls and that type of thing, right?
Yes, you know what? That's a number one I get from interacting with people. A lot of people are like, "Yeah, I want to dance, I want to groove," but a lot of times they just want to improve simple things like balance, improve
Yeah.
things like that. So these exercises are really key for that. Even if you're not applying it to dance, which I mean, that's why she's given them to us. But they, more important than dance, will help with your everyday life, will help with your balance, will help with your support. Like I love these. These are great.
Yeah. So I hope you all enjoy it and give us some feedback about it as well. How well did it work out for you? Are there other things you'd like to see? Um, we'd love the feedback. Hi, I'm David Leip with Find.dance and our new podcast, Talk.dance. I'm here with the incredible Tatiana Keegan. Tatiana is a wonderful performer and instructor here in the New York City area. And today, Tatiana is going to show us some exercises to strengthen our ankles to help social dancers. So, Tatiana, how can people best reach you if they want to contact you?
Hi, the best way is just through Talk.dance.com. This is my website. So that's the simple way.
Awesome. So we're going to go to the ballroom in a minute, and Tatiana's going to give us some torture. Yes?
Duh.
Looking forward to it?
Always.
She lives
The
for
first
this.
exercise exercise we're going to do is to improve our ankles. They're always very weak, especially when it's cold outside. So it's very important to make them strong, because that's what moves us from the foot to the foot when we dance any kind of dances. So first we have to keep feet parallel, and we'll lift left foot up and bring the opposite right arm forward. And now we're going to swing the leg forward and back. Okay? And we're counting. 1, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So in a different direction, from the left to the right. 1, 2, and we're swinging arms always opposite. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And now one more, we make a semicircle of the foot from forward to back. 1, 2, and arms still work on opposition. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And shake it up. And then you're going to do everything with the opposite leg. The other exercise for this is relevé, like we say in ballet, or lifting our heels all the way up and putting them down. So again, feet are parallel, arms can be on your hips, and we're going to come up on the toes 8 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then we come up and wait there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and down on 16. And repeat again. Try to do 3 or maybe 4 sets. It's going to be very painful, especially in your calf muscles, but that's good for you.